To start this episode off, I want to read a quote from C.S. Lewis, who was a close friend of J.R.R. Tolkien, who is the author of Lord of the Rings series. He says that the central theme of the book is the contrast between the hobbits and the Shire and the appalling destiny to which some of them are called, the terrifying discovery that the humdrum happiness of the Shire, which they had taken for granted as something normal, is in reality a sort of local and temporary accident, that its existence depends on being protected by powers which hobbits forget against powers which hobbits dare not imagine. Now, this seems relevant as we speak, as bombs are dropping throughout the Middle East. We just got an update that Israel just struck Tehran once again, and they're evacuating a few more areas within Iran and neighboring nations in the Middle East. The war just broke out a few days ago, and it's been controversial and also a little bit, what would you say? A little bit,
Terrifying.
yeah, yeah, for lack of a better word. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, so I actually didn't realize that that was C.S. Lewis writing to Tolkien. I thought that that was just one of the lines from Lord of the Rings. Sounds, I mean, also makes sense. C.S. Lewis, another one of the great novelists of that time. Um, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe guy, the Chronicles of Narnia. It's it is fitting for sure because you don't realize what you're getting into. Most people can't fathom, what's going on here. Not saying that me and you really can because we've been texting each other for days trying to work out, like what's really going on, like what the actual plan is, if there is a plan, sort of deal. Um, this whole thing started what like 3 days ago, I think it was, and there's already been how many twists and turns and developments. It started off with the supreme leader Khomeini being struck by one of our air raids, being killed in that air raid. It's That's a big blow for them right off the bat. Have you seen that we've also supposedly taken out the next like top three guys after that as well? Guys who we thought were gonna come in and like take over basically.
Yeah, yeah, we took out pretty much the entire line of secession. Basically, I mean, everyone associated at a high level with the Ayatollah regime is if they're not yet, they're on the target list. So shortly after Ayatollah Khomeini was taken out, there was a regrouping at one of the, I don't know if it was in Tehran, but it was basically all of the next in line officials came together to try to regroup and figure out what to do. And I think there was 42 of them in a place. I think out of, I might be botching the numbers a little bit, but it was something along like 42 out of the 44 were all in this building, and there was like one who missed it, like didn't make it, and then another one who was like missing at the time, and all of them were in a building that then they got struck. So it took out pretty much their entire kind of their entire elite organization at once, and that was over the weekend. It's now Thursday, so it's been 5 days, and it doesn't seem to have calmed down at all. It seems to have continued escalating. Iran responds by launching attacks on all of the Gulf states, um, which were then met by further retaliatory attacks. We do see that they closed the Strait of Hormuz,
Yeah,
which was expected.
that's one of the biggest aspects of this whole thing right there.
Yeah, yeah, and that was expected. I just saw today that China is in negotiations with Iran on allowing an exception for them exclusively, which did not see that coming, but in hindsight makes perfect sense, and I wouldn't be surprised if that deal goes through, because if we look at it, Iran's in desperate need of a powerful ally, and China's in desperate need of a way to access their oil supply, which, in my opinion, was one of the primary reasons for this attack to begin with. Um, we can kind of get through all of that. I mean, we were having a little bit of a debate earlier about um, the motivation for this attack, and also whether or not it was justified. My take on it was that I can't really say whether it is justified or not. Uh, Simply because I don't really even think it was much of a choice. I think the choice was not war or no war. The choice was war now or war later. And so when it comes to that, we can get into the details on that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the cause of the war, I guess let's start with that. So,
Yep.
in my opinion, I think the whole nuclear reasoning that we've been given by the White House is probably partially true, but it's definitely a side motivation, if anything, not the primary motivation. I think that problem's been solved for quite a while.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of issues. Right now, it's a massively unpopular war. I think something in like the 20s I'm seeing in support, and that was at the very end of Vietnam. Like Vietnam polling was in like the 20s. This one's starting off there. Usually you start off a war with much higher numbers just because something's happened and people start off like nationalistic and patriotic, more supportive, and then generally as war drags on, years go by, people realize like, all right, we don't want to fucking be here anymore. This one's starting out massively unpopular. Nuclear one, I mean, I agree with that one. One of the issues that the administration is facing right now is they've cited like five different reasons, it feels like, for why this has happened. They're not even like really trying to give you, like a reason. They're just giving you all of the reasons or any reason, it kind of feels like, for this to happen. And maybe it is a culmination of all of them, but they're doing the weapons of mass destruction line, which 3 months ago, 4 months ago, we bombed their nuclear facilities. And there's been a page up on the White House website saying uh, the nuclear capabilities of Iran were destroyed in, what was that, Midnight Hammer? Was that one?
Yeah, Operation Midnight Hammer,
Yeah,
as opposed to Operation Epic Fury.
they were destroyed in Operation Midnight Hammer, and any other report saying otherwise is fake news. And then they're coming out and saying they were weeks away from creating a bomb. Something doesn't really add up there. Dude, they were fucking talking about like weeks back when Iran was in protest. They're like, we can't allow an oppressive government to kill its own people. Like, oh, that's the reason we're going in here. Like we're liberating the people. That's another one of those lines. So it feels like a lot of miscommunication from the administration. Have you been feeling any of that?
Well, I wouldn't call it miscommunication. I would say it's intentional propaganda, basically. They've given a lot of reasons, and none of them sound good.
Right.
But I do think so, yes. Like when it comes to the unrest in Iran that saw about a month ago, I do think that plays a role, but it's not the role that we're being told. So the role that we're being told is they're saying, well, look at the Iranian government, they're attacking their own people. There's unrest in Iran. The economy's gone in shambles. We need to go in and save these people. We need to liberate these people. And I believe it was Ronald Reagan who once said that some of the scariest words in the world are "We are the U.S. government and we're here to help." So to me, the video that Trump posted to the Iranian people saying like, "Don't worry, we're coming in, and everyone take shelter, and then you will be free." And it's like that was like so dystopian. It reminded you of like some like Orwellian kind of deal. That's not what's happening. What I think is actually happening is that they're taking advantage of the unrest in Iran and realizing that the government is weak, the economy is weak. There is a lot of domestic opposition to the government, and so they can use that to win support amongst the people. It'd be much harder to rally up the troops and get everyone patriotic to go fight against the invading country when all of the people are against their home government to begin with. So that's something they're taking advantage of. When it comes to the nuclear thing, it's been a potential problem for a very long time, and we've been handling it accordingly ever since without a war. So what happens in throughout the early 2010s during the Obama administration is that there is intelligence that's saying that Iran has been building up their nuclear capabilities and they're enriching uranium. And during this time, we were actually somewhat allies with Iran because we had just gone to war in Iraq, which was a big rival of Iran. And so we were working through diplomacy to try to reach a deal to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon because we did understand that, okay, them having a nuclear weapon, that's not good. That part I think everyone agreed on. They also had the kind of idea of, well, if we don't have a nuclear weapon, what's to say that you're not going to come here just like you did in Afghanistan, just like you did in Syria, just like you did in Iraq? And so we come to an agreement called the JCPOA. It stood for the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, I believe. Might be botching that. But anyway, the idea is we will free up, at the time we've been using economic sanctions like we've talked about before, we will free up all of the money that we've had frozen in that supposedly belongs to Iran. In return, they will halt all of their nuclear enrichment of uranium. That happens in like 2014, 2015. In 2017, Trump immediately gets into office and tears that up and says deals off. And so what happens? They immediately start building back up the uranium capabilities. And we've kind of been in back and forth negotiations ever since, which we've seen escalate into violence. I know Netanyahu is a big influential component in this because he has been ever since 2017 when we first tore that deal up. But for Trump to now come back and say, well, the reason we have to do this is because they have nuclear capabilities or they're trying to build up nuclear capabilities. We did have an agreement with them where they had agreed not to do that, and Trump was the one that tore it up. So I'm
Why
not
did
even
Trump?
going to say Trump's right or wrong, but
Why did
I mean,
Trump
there's
tear it up? Was it like a bad deal for us? Were we like giving him money or something? Do you know
yeah,
what?
well, so I mean, so it was their money. So that's the one thing. It was their money. They earned the money by selling oil. But because we own the financial infrastructure, we have the power to freeze their bank accounts. So we just froze their bank accounts basically. And the deal, what they got out of the deal was that their bank accounts would be unfrozen. Now, Trump's justification for tearing it up, which I don't think he's wrong on. He says, for one, this this just unloads billions and billions of dollars into Iran, who we know is, an ally of some of our geopolitical rivals, and we know for a fact that they're run by an authoritarian theocracy who does not value human life. And so he poses that as a threat. It's also bad, though, and I think this is more important for Trump, that it's bad for American business because at the time, the Iranian economy is tanking because obviously they can't make any money and no other country is allowed to buy oil from them. If this deal goes through, all these other countries are going to start buying oil. That's oil that they would otherwise be buying from American allies. And so at the time, there was that was the drill baby drill. That was the origination of that. We started producing our own oil because of the profit that came with it. And if this were to go through, Iran would be able to undercut us, and there goes our home domestic oil business. This was also the same time. I mean, the JCPOA was written up by all of the all of the environmentalists. You've got like John Kerry and all of the big like green energy, sustainable energy people. That was part of it. That was part of that movement. Was well, we're going to go to sustainable energy. That's what's going to boost American economy. And we know the Trump's idea was no, we're going to stick with fracking, drill baby drill. We're going to go oil. If we wanted to continue being have a profitable oil industry domestically, then allowing Iran to continue, boosting up their oil production would be bad.
Got it. So I it doesn't really matter, if tearing up that was a good or a bad idea. The issue just then became that they could then start doing nuclear again.
Yes, and I do think like I am not opposed to it. Like I don't think it was a terrible, stupid idea. I don't think it was like we've said a few times. Trump's often portrayed as just like a megalomaniac, just making decisions off the cuff. Like I don't think it was even like him personally that made the decision, but his administration. But regardless, it might have been a good idea. I mean, there's no good or bad. It's only trade off. So if we want to prioritize domestic oil production and safety in the region, fine, then it's a good idea. But then to come back and say that that's now the justification for invading is a bad justification. Like if
Yeah.
that seems a little bit manipulative. That's manipulating the narrative. That's making shit up because operating under the impression that nobody remembers that, 7 years ago, or I guess 9 years ago now.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to get back to was the Strait of Hormuz closing. I saw some statistics saying, I forget exactly what it was, but it's something like for every like $10 that oil increase, like the barrel of oil increases in cost, it's like 25 basis points of inflation. So basically, like, and it makes sense, right? It's not just the fact that like, oh, like gas is going to be more expensive for everyone, so which it will. Like literally, like I think a couple of days ago, it shot up like 50 cents or something near me. But oil runs the goddamn economy. Everything's going to get more expensive when oil gets more expensive. Like groceries, fucking anything that's produced. I'm like I know my company imports a lot of things from China, uh, Asian countries like that. It's gonna affect those imports and everything as well. One of the things I've seen on the Strait of Hormuz closing is like in like the last like day or two, we've been talking about like, oh well, they have like no navy, they can't actually like effectively close it down. That's not that's not really true though. You don't need something blocking the actual strait when you have missiles that can shoot it down. Do we have like interceptors on ships that can like escort like tankers? Is that a thing?
That I'm not sure of. I'm hoping that there is a contingency. I have to assume that the administration and the Pentagon understood that this was going to be the very next move from Iran as soon as the strike happened. So I'm guessing that there is some type of plan here. And let me just share this real quick so people can follow what we're talking about here. All right, you can see that. So when we're talking about this, the Strait of Hormuz here, I believe this is it, right? Yeah, yeah. So it's right here. So you've got Iran right here, and this is, we were looking at some videos over the weekend of Dubai and the U. And when I mentioned the Gulf states, I'm talking about these states over here. And these are a lot of our allies. Qatar is kind of neutral, I think, but I think most of the rest of these are our allies. You've got Saudi Arabia, you've got the UAE, and then you've got Dubai right here. So really, the strait here is between Dubai and Iran, which is why Dubai and Saudi Arabia and the UAE are on the target list for Iran, is because this is where the choke point is for the war. All of the shipments that come from, oops, sorry, all the shipments that come from up here, kind of in the in Russia's sphere, most of them come down through Strait of Hormuz. Everything over here, this is all, big oil producing countries. And so this is also where China gets all of their oil. We'll get into China in a little while as well. But blocking that strait right there is going to cause absolute madness for the global economy, because that's one, when it comes to oil specifically. I believe that's like by far it's this one, and then down here is the Suez Canal. These two are by far the like the biggest choke points for oil shipments. Now, the
I
thing
think
about the
like
Suez Canal,
25% of oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz.
yeah, and I think it's similar through the Suez Canal. And the thing about the Suez Canal is the Suez Canal is also controlled by Iran, because it's controlled through one of their proxies, which is the Houthis, and they're located here in Yemen. You might have heard of them as like the Houthi pirates. These are the guys that kind of dominate this area here by the Suez Canal, and so they don't have the government power to shut it down like Iran does, but they do have basically the power to cause a bunch of violence in it, and delay things, and steal and do whatever they need to do to cause chaos there, so that shipments can't get through.
Are the Houthis on Iran's side? I thought I read something that they weren't.
I mean, as far as I know, the Houthis are directly funded by Iran. It's kind of like their web of proxies, and it's the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas are three of the big ones.
Yeah.
Um, which that's another point I kind of wanted to bring up too, is when it comes to the timing of the war, there's a few other things we could talk about there. One of them, I believe, though, is simply that the proxies, other than the Houthis, I'm not sure what's going on with them, but Hez Hezbollah is in
Is in Lebanon.
Lebanon.
Yeah.
They're still a potential threat, and I think that they might have just tried pulling some moves today on Israel. But
No, I have in my notes, Israel apparently launched a ground invasion of Lebanon. They're calling it a forward defense to go after Hezbollah. Forward defense, I thought was pretty funny. Like, just call it an offense.
yeah, okay, that actually makes more sense. So it wasn't. So Israel is trying to defend themselves from the potential that Hezbollah
Yes, yeah,
attacks them.
of course, of course.
Um, but the other one was the Assad regime in Syria. That was the one I was forgetting. They've been having a civil war forever. We've been totally involved, probably funding the whole thing. Hamas, as we know, is either exhausted or done based on this Palestinian versus Israel war. So a lot of Iran's proxies throughout the region are incapacitated or at least weakened, and so I think that has a little bit to do with the timing.
Yeah, I just thought I had seen something. So I think the Houthis like are part of Iran. There's something I thought I read something like they're like an ethnic minority in the region. So I think we've like used the Houthis before to try and like sow some discontent or something.
But yeah, I'm sure we have because
Yeah.
we've been doing so. So I'm guessing it's the Shias. It's the Shias versus the Sunnis, and they're
Yes.
basically two religious factions. And the Sunnis is primarily fill up the region when it comes to population and when it at least comes to like who's in control. So every country in the Gulf states is basically run by the Sunnis. Now the difference between them, I don't want to get too specific because I don't know, but basically what it comes down to is it was a split that happened like probably over a century ago, or I think way longer than that, I think like 10 centuries ago maybe. But basically the Shias believed in inheritance of power basically. So they believe that like the Ayatollah is believed to be a religious figure himself, and then it has to be his offspring that then takes the throne afterwards. The Sunnis, they still believe in somewhat of a religious, it's still a theocracy in the sense that the government is run by religious principles, but it does not necessarily have to be a religious figure running the government. It could be like if I was, if I wanted to pass it down to someone who's not related to me, who I think is just doing a good job, I could do that. That's kind of like the layman's gist of it. And the Shias are pretty much um, a minority everywhere at this point, but Iran has been the main hub of the Shias since the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Um, and so they've always had beef between the Sunnis and the Shias. And what we have done is we have come in and funded one side or the other in order to get our geopolitical interests, most specifically in the Cold War against the Soviets. And that's what really kind of kicked off the whole Afghanistan thing.
Yeah, because didn't we like arm bin Laden at one point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. 100%. We not only just bin Laden, the entire Taliban,
Yeah.
everything they had came from us. And that's an interesting one too. That was during the 80s. So Afghanistan has a communist government backed by the Soviets. And at the time it was kind of a revival of the like Islamist. By the way, this is 1979. This is the same time that the Ayatollah regime overthrew the Shah and came back to power. That was a religious revival of government. They were saying all of these godless governments are causing havoc in the region, which they entirely
And
were.
we had installed the Shah, correct?
We had
Because
installed Shah, yes.
we went in there. I think they were trying to nationalize their oil, BP oil at the time, which was called Iran, like Iran UK oil or some shit like that. That wouldn't have been good for them. So then we go in, depose that democratically elected guy in favor of the Shah.
Yes. And so once the Ayatollahs overthrow the Shah, is 1979, and this kicks off like a religious revival all throughout the region. Because at the time, you've got a bunch of schools that are kind of it's similar to how like we see like in the 70s here, where you had a lot of like the anti-war movement, and you had like a kind of a left-wing push. This was like I don't know if you'd call it left or right, but it was like the religious push where this new kind of zeitgeist of like this religious reawakening was happening, and you had all these militant groups forming. And so in Afghanistan at the time, you've got the Afghan rebels, the Mujahideen, fighting back against this communist government that has been funded and basically installed by the Soviets. And so the United States sees this as a good opportunity. And so through Pakistan, through our intelligence agency and Pakistan's, which I think is the ISI, we kind of set up this network where we were going to funnel money into Pakistan to be used to fund and train the Mujahideen to go then and fight the Soviets. And it worked. And they got the Soviets out of there and they retook the government. But the problem was that these were like a bunch of like rebel, misfit militant groups. And so as soon as the Soviets were gone, we said, all right, job done. And we got out of there. And then it was just chaos because now you've got a bunch of tribal warlords fighting each other. One of those tribal warlords who got built like hundreds of billions of dollars from us was Osama bin Laden and the Taliban, which was not even from the region. They're from Saudi Arabia. He's a Saudi Arabian oligarch, basically. His family owns some of the biggest construction firms in Saudi Arabia, but he was also a huge funder of this, by the way. But he kind of becomes the leader, and they're harboring him because he's giving them all the money and everything. But anyway, once the Soviets are gone, we continue to occupy all of these Gulf states, all these Gulf states. Now, the whole point of the Mujahideen was to say we don't want these godless Western states ruling over us. We are an Islamic state, and we want Islam to rule. And so, once the Soviets leave, they turn around and they look at the United States in the Western occupiers, and they say like, "Well, you're next." And then that's eventually what led to 9/11 and all that came after.
Brief history lesson for everyone there. Just some of the conflicts in the Middle East that have been going on. Well, we're still on causes of this war. I have one written down here. Do you see the Rubio statement? I think it was a day or two ago. They were asking him like, well, why war now? This is kind of actually what you said at the beginning. It's not a question of yes war, no war, like it was more like when war. And they asked him like, well, why now? And he said, well, we had an imminent threat that had presented itself. Apparently Israel had told us they were going to go in and bomb Iran. And since we knew that Iran would retaliate, not just against Israel, they'd retaliate against us as well, and the other Gulf states there, then we figured, well, we can't let them be as capable of launching these retaliations. So if we don't go with them, Iran will be stronger to retaliate against us. So if we do go with them, we can minimize their ability to retaliate. And so that was the imminent threat that was facing us. Wasn't an Iranian imminent threat. It was the Israelis' apparent imminent threat saying, we're doing this with or without you. So we basically had to go with them. And he's basically admitting there that Israel dragged us into this war, right?
Yeah, that one is hilarious. An imminent threat from our strongest ally.
Who
Yeah,
should be our client state, who should be our absolute bitch that does whatever we say that we want them to do. But instead, for some reason, it feels like the other way around most of the time.
I mean, I understand the alliance, but why are we so committed to Israel when it's hurting us? And when it comes down even to the Israel-Palestine war that's been going on for the last couple of years, even that, it was like that hurt the United States. Not only just financially, but it hurt our stance on it hurt our position on the global stage when we're funding a war that I think is pretty clear that it violated what we would consider norms when it comes to wars. We also didn't gain anything from it, as far as I believe, when it comes to the economics of it. And so I'm curious as to why that was a number one priority to us. I'm not saying that Israel owns us necessarily. I understand the alliance to a degree, but you would think that when it comes to that alliance, we would be the big dogs, like you said, and they would be listening to us, and we'd have a little bit more say, because it's starting to seem like they just do whatever they want, and we just follow them.
And that's where all the conspiracy theories come from, of like the fact that Israel like controls our government or something, that even ties into the whole Epstein thing. It's like, oh, they clearly have blackmail over us, because some of these things are seemingly confusing without that sort of element, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility that I've thought about, which is that, like, if you look at Trump's first term compared to this term, it's way different. And could it be that, there is he is compromised? I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that. I've never seen any direct evidence of that, but it's starting to seem a lot like that when you've got the Epstein files coming out. You got Trump, for one, saying, no new wars, no new wars. I've ended all these wars. Then quick Iran strike during the summer. And basically, he's trying to kind of avoid any type of conflict in Iran. And then, towards the fall, all the Epstein stuff starts coming up. He goes pretty quiet on it. Then the entire Epstein Transparency Act drops all the files. And shortly after, there's a full-on airstrike attack in Iran from the United States. That timing seems strange as well. And so, just speculation.
One of the biggest things that I've been seeing on my feeds, I legitimately cannot tell the difference between what is real and what is not online. And there is an insane amount of propaganda online right now. I'll see like this insane like missile strike happen. I'm like, oh my God, is this real? Then you go in the comments and like Grok is even confused. Grok on the same post, I see him say like, yes, this is genuine footage from Tel Aviv or whatever. And then like someone's like, no, like actually like, is this real? And he's like, oh no, this is actually like a fabrication or whatever. So even Grok is seemingly confused at this point. I can't tell anymore.
Modern warfare is not a war of it's not a symmetric war of like one country versus a country and we battle it out and whoever's stronger wins. It's more of a psychological war where it's like, can we beat you without firing a single bullet? Nowadays, I bet that could happen easily because all we really have to do is convince the your population that this war is not worth fighting, and then you've lost because no one's going to fight. And that, I mean, we've seen that happen a little bit in the Cold War. I think during the Cold War, it was like nothing compared to what's happening now. You've got the algorithms, the AI, everything. Hesitate to trust anything that doesn't come from a reputable source because it is all. It might not even be real. You know, it might be footage that's not even real, and who knows who's behind that.
Dude, propaganda used to be like in like the 50s. It was like a poster of like some Chad looking guy, like, I will defend the motherland. Now propaganda is literally like an Iranian dude like posting from Dubai, speaking about like Israeli forces committing atrocities in Palestine, so that you think that like, oh, I don't know, you know, it's like four steps of removal from what's going on. It's impossible to track, you know, motivations and incentives and who's actually posting what and for what reason.
But when you look at like, let's look at. There's a few similarities that we see here. Okay, we just got done with this whole Venezuela debate. Now, what was the talking point in Venezuela? It was, well, look at the Venezuelans. They're celebrating because and that wasn't fake. They were celebrating. Uh, then you go into Iran and you know, even though their government was an authoritarian, theocratic dictator who did oppress the people, probably in some ways, did violate human rights. There was a pretty small percent chance that the majority of the population was cheering on, yes, let's have these foreign invaders who don't look like us, who don't believe in the same things as us. Let's have them come in and take out our government, kill them, bomb us a bunch of times, and then we'll rise from the ashes and we'll cheer them and we'll say, "Yeah, we're free." That's not how it goes. But there are people doing that. There are people in Iran celebrating. Why? It's because the same weapons that they're using on us to confuse us, and whether it's trying to get us to fight each other or trying to get us to oppose our own government so we don't want to fight our wars and all of this, those same weapons we are using on them. And so when you see people celebrating the streets in Iran, that is a success to the United States propaganda machine because you now have a bunch of people who see Western culture and what do they see? They see, all like when it comes to the women, it's like women's rights and all this freedom and wealth and all this, the whole American dream kind of deal. It's like those people are saying like, yeah, these are the good guys. But as we know, living here, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great, but it's not, we know the corruption in our government. We've seen the Epstein files. We know that our guys are not angels. And so that is just another weapon used. The more civil unrest you have at home, the harder it is to defend yourself against, foreign hostilities abroad. And I think we see that with Venezuela and with Iran and probably with most countries at this point because that's what's going on. It's no longer the United States versus Iran. It's like this half of Iran versus this half of Iran and this half of the United States versus this half of the United States. And then those two halves, end up kind of all having a similar incentive.
Yeah, it definitely is. Modern wars are media wars for the most part. They're still bankers wars for sure. It's not Trump making these decisions fucking on his own, right? It's the administration. So it's not like it's not oh my god, they have to distract from the Epstein files, so they're gonna go like blow up Iran, right? It's like I not everything is a distraction from something else, right? The war for hearts and minds, why is it that when you're on TikTok, then you probably have a much better view of China than if you're on like Instagram or Facebook, right? If most of the stuff that you're seeing, you're probably seeing a lot more pro Chinese things on TikTok than you were on seeing on Facebook or Instagram. So it's just
Exactly.
it's one of those things that's just like it permeates the ability that governments and media have now to reach directly into your brain is so much different than it was, during like the Cold War.
Exactly. And that kind of goes to something else that we were texting about, which is that, when it comes to like whether or not it's a just war, like I think we generally agree when it comes to like what are the just tactics of a war. I don't think it's a just tactic to blow up a 120 school children, obviously, but when it comes to like whether or not, are we the good guys or the bad guys?
There
Well, for
really
one,
isn't
I don't believe.
just war, realistically. I,
Right.
not
No. Yeah. I don't
right.
think there's a just war necessarily, but I just don't think when it comes to like any war, I don't think there is necessarily good guys or bad
You're
guys
right.
either.
No.
It is all just incentive structures. Part of the disadvantage I think we have in this war, and this is what scares me actually, and this is why I am trying to be like a pro-America guy on this, is because part of the problem I think is that if we both acknowledge that this social media, these algorithms, the AI, all this stuff can be used as a weapon to mold the hearts and minds of people, which side of this kind of global conflict allows for freedom of information and allows for communication and for like I can see what's going on in the Middle East. The only places I can't see what's going on are places where that government doesn't let us see into their country. Now you could say, well, that's for security purposes. They don't want the CIA being able to look into them. Fine, that's good. How come their citizens can't see out? They can fuck with our citizenry because we're allowed to use TikTok. We're allowed to have their algorithms and their bots from Russia. You got the Russian interference. You got a bunch of Russian bots on Twitter. Remember on Twitter when like all of the locations they like updated it so you could see everyone's location, and it turned out all of the like proud American MAGA accounts were all like from Nigeria. It's like
Uh,
that they're allowed to infiltrate our communication systems, but they've got the Chinese firewall, they've got the Russian firewall, so we're not allowed to get into theirs. And so they can maintain a stable populace while we can't. And that's, I think, is
yeah.
the biggest weapon that's destroying us. Because think about it, we've got the strongest military and we've got world reserve currency status for the economy. So you'd think that there's we are invincible, but the way to destroy us, they're not going to be able to invade, and with our economic strength, they're not going to be able to take our allies away from us as easy as they think they can. But what they can do is they can infiltrate the minds of the people on the inside, so that instability comes from the bottom up, and then we crumble from the inside. That I think used to sound like a conspiracy theory, and I think now it's almost like obvious.
Yeah, that's just basically fact. It seems like at this point. Yeah,
Hmm.
I saw a quote the other day. It's like, yeah, it turns out the Great Chinese Firewall wasn't about like keeping information in. It was about keeping information out.
Yeah.
Right?
No. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
It's not about like them protecting their secrets, or it's it's them not allowing their citizens to be westernized, basically, to get our influence. That whatever they probably have a very similar portion of the population that as soon as they see like western ideas, the way things are run here, they'll probably be like, oh, that's pretty damn good, right? Obviously China has a lot of good things going for it, but they don't have some of the things that we do. Like, for instance, in China, you can't get incredibly wealthy, right? It's almost impossible for most people to work its way up. Our upward mobility has stagnated in America, but I still think we have one of the highest rates of upward mobility of anyone in the world, right? And obviously, we have um, much more freedom of expression, right? Freedom of speech. That's kind of what this entire thing entails. What does that mean? Is we have the best goddamn media in the world. Not media as in like social media or like the news, media as in movies and books and music, culture. We have like the best goddamn culture in the world. It's exported all over the world for the most part, right? So, and any portion of their population that would then want to change things there, they can't even get that information, wherein we're allowed to see, at least we think we're allowed to see almost anything. Which I don't know if we're as open to seeing a lot of the shit that we think we are. Probably not.
No, I mean, yeah, there's definitely restrictions on, but I think those have come a lot more recently because of this. And this gets back to like why are we in this war to begin with? Like we were talking over text earlier of like, well, why can't like a communist state just exist and the capitalist state just exist? Now, this is theory, so I think you're going to disagree, and that's all right. But in my theory, if we go back to the Cold War, how did the Soviet Union actually collapse? I mean, they did have a strong military, and they actually surprisingly had a lot of innovation. But part of it was a hearts and minds campaign, which is that the people in the Soviet Union saw, or at least like in East Berlin. Well, part of the reason the wall came down was because they were able to travel and communicate beyond the wall, where they could see what's going on in West Berlin, and they can see the music, and they can see the blue jeans and the pop culture, and it seems so much more fun compared to this kind of like kind of low quality of life situation that was happening on the east. And so that actually destroyed the hearts and minds of the Soviet of the hardcore communists. Meanwhile, they're pushing out their own propaganda, and you had a lot of pro-communists in the United States because, from our perspective, we were seeing like oh yeah, well look at the corporation. It was all a bad. It was like look how rich and powerful all these big corporations are. Like it would be so much better if we were all just egalitarian. And so there was kind of a battle of like, can we persuade people if we can persuade enough citizens of Russia that communism is bad, well, then the Russian government doesn't stand a chance because they'll just overthrow the government. And same applies here. And so I think that's very telling, though. My point that I'm getting to is that it's the communist countries that put up the Great Walls, the Great Firewalls, and that fact to me is at least partial proof that it's like what we're seeing about China is definitely not true. And the reason I know that is because they're not letting their citizens see us. And so if we were so much worse than China, China was so much better, they'd be like, look at them, look at how bad they are. You're better off here. You're better off agreeing with the CCP. But because they're blocking that, to me that indicates that they have an incentive to not allow people to see what life is like under a free market capitalist system, you know, and that's up for debate, obviously. Though.
Yeah, so let me finish that. Couple things. I think I'd kind of heard something along the lines of like, yeah, like blue jeans and like rock and roll is what actually like tore down the USSR. It's like something like that. I do know, so I'm not incredibly versed on, like how subversive, like American culture was, and if that was one of the leading factors that led to their collapse. I know it was definitely their standard of living. That was one of the main reasons for their collapse. There's a story, I think it's Khrushchev. I think Khrushchev and his wife were visiting the United States. This is like towards the end of the Cold War when we are starting to get friendlier. So they visited the United States and they went to like a supermarket, and Khrushchev's wife has her shopping cart and she has fucking piled into her cart like so much like ground beef and like steaks and like chicken and shit, right? And she comes back and she's like, no one grabbed this, right? What does that mean? In the USSR, they had meat days once a week. So everyone would show up, grab all the meat as soon as they could, take it away. They had no fucking idea the amount of like abundance realistically that we had. And apparently that's Khrushchev realized at that point that the USSR was doomed, that they could never be able to take on America when we have so much meat, basically. So that was one thing I wanted to share. More thing on China. They can't see everything of us. They can't see a lot of things of us, but they can see some. And like I've heard, I've seen some things online that like some of the things that China reads about the US, they believe is actually propaganda, right? They can't even believe it because it seems so backwards to them. Like if you were take like a trip in a fucking ambulance to the hospital, that can like bankrupt you, right? They're like that.
Yeah.
There's no way that that's true. That has to be propaganda running against us, even though that is true.
Right, but that's what I mean is that like that will get through the government
right.
filters because that's the bad part.
Exactly.
But whereas like from our perspective, it's like, when we we get the good and bad, they only get the bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's an uneven playing field really when it comes to the information distribution. And that I think we need to like as much as I've bagged on China, like ideal kind of fantasy universe would be to develop a healthy working relationship with China and run it as I don't care if they're also a superpower. I just don't want America to see a catastrophic collapse or even like a very strong decline where we no longer really have any opportunity for growth. We just have to slowly get worse and worse. If we can both kind of grow together, that would be great. But in order to do that, we need to have we need to be playing by the same rules. We need to have a transparency. And in order to do that, and this kind of gets to a good philosophical question, which is that and has to do with what we were talking earlier over text, which is when it comes to like capitalism versus communists. Well, the communists will say, and I've heard them say this, they'll say the thing about capitalism is that they're a capitalists are kind of a parasite, and they rely, which is true, they rely on continued growth, and so they need to continue invading, and they can't just let the communists just live in our if we want to have a communist state, eventually the capitalists would infringe upon it. And my argument back, and I, I seems to be in history, is that like, well, the same thing applies to the communists too. The communists can't have just a normal communist state because the capitalists unintentionally do. I mean, most likely intentionally, but sometimes unintentionally, do infringe upon it just by offering the people an alternative. And so it might be like a this might be like a philosophical like law of nature almost, whereas you cannot have like you can't have a communist and capitalist state coexist. It's impossible because they are by nature, by the very fact of them being established, at war with each other because the capitalist produces the better results.
Yeah, so it took me a while to respond to one of your texts earlier because I went down this rabbit hole of so you were basically one of the things that you mentioned was the Russian war, right? So Russia invades Ukraine, and if everyone lived in free market, and no one would do business with Russia anymore, they couldn't sell their oil, they couldn't fund their war, so they probably wouldn't even invade in the first place, right? So, but now what's happened is they have their own little sphere of influence. They can intertrade with China, Iran, a couple other people, so that they can actually stay funded and stay, out of the loop, essentially, right? And what that brought me to was one of the quotes. I'm sure you've heard this before that like two democracies have never gone to war against each other, right? And then so I look up this book, and I think what that comes from is this book from like 1998. I forget the exact title, but the second thing is like why democracies never fight. And then the guy proposes that democracies never fight democracies and monarchies never fight monarchies, but monarchies and democracies will fight each other, right? And then right
Is
off
the
the bat,
economic incentive, I'm betting.
because of like economic incentives, right? Like basically a misalignment of beliefs, essentially, right? And I thought of that, and right off the top of my head, I'm like, well, no, like I could think of so many wars of antiquity that are monarchies versus monarchies. There used to basically only be monarchies, right? Before like the 1700s or something, it was basically only monarchies. Fucking like, all right, you could say like Athens was a democracy. They invented democracy, at least that's what the West says, right? And it was a very early democracy, but I could think of off the top of my head monarchies fighting monarchies. And then I'm like reading qualifiers, and then the guy only like starts basing it off of like the year 1800 after, right? So I think, have you heard the one that two countries with a McDonald's have never gone to war with each other?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's kind of the same
It's
meaning.
the yeah, it's that same concept, right? Um, and then the one thing I had, so I'm going through that. I'm like, all right, it makes sense that like if everyone is in open markets and you launch some war of aggression, that you wouldn't be able to do business. And then I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure America has launched wars of aggression in the last like 60, 70 years. We've just gone around deposing whatever governments we've essentially wanted to. And that's when I texted you. But now I can't really understand like South America. I'm like, so is it basically just that anytime a socialist or communist country pops up, we essentially, as the global hegemon, the global leader of quote unquote free market capitalism, then have to go and try and depose any form of leftist government that arises because they could create a sphere of influence outside of our own that could then compete against us. And you were like, yeah, kind of, I think so.
Yeah, and yeah, but that still is not mutually exclusive. That's it still fits into what you're saying about democracy versus a democracy has never gone to war, and that comes down to actually, as you were saying that, I kind of pieced together what I was trying to say in my head, which is that so okay, so for one, I want to establish one fundamental fact, and we can debate this if we disagree. There is no such thing as a socialist democracy. Democratic socialism is an oxymoron that does not exist. They point to the Scandinavian countries and say that's democratic socialism. Okay, that's fine if that's what you want to call it, but it's not socialism, it's not communism. It is a free market capitalist state with a safety net. When we talk about actual socialism, communism, we're talking it by definition is not a democracy. They're the opposites. And so basically what I'm kind of coming down to is that the
Because
reason that
let
we
me
have to
happen right there. Because
yeah, yeah.
what happened right there, and a lot of the things that I see of like the anti-American side of, like our, I don't know if you call it like our imperialist days or like our colonial days, or well, colonialism I think would have been like before World War II, and all of this is like after World War II when we're the global superpower and doing whatever the fuck we want. It always starts off with X country like Panama, say, democratically elected like a socialist leader who is going to nationalize their resources, and then the US comes and overthrows them. And that's always where it starts, is a democracy elects a socialist government, essentially.
But a socialist government cannot be a democracy. Basically what happens here is that a democracy votes to end democracy.
Okay.
If a capitalist system exists, then communists fundamentally need to suppress their people from seeing what's happening in the capitalist system. And so the very existence of the capitalist system is a threat to their communist system because it threatens them by that hearts and minds argument. At the same time,
and vice versa, right?
the difference is that it wouldn't threaten capitalism if I saw what was going on in Russia, because I would look at that and I'd be like, well, if I saw it actually transparently, I'd be like, well, I mean, it doesn't look any better than here. But what capitalism's thing is that it does need continuous growth. There's no, all right, we've got enough, and then we can level off now, and we're good. We always need more resources, more innovation, more. We need to keep constantly expanding. That's built into the capitalist system. And so, from the communist perspective, it's like, well, they need continuous growth. They're eventually going to have to come here and take our shit. So they're a threat to us by nature. From the capitalist system, it's like, well, their people, if they see the abundance that we have, they're going to revolt. So it's just both sides kind of have that view of like their existence is a threat to my existence.
It feels like it would be more advantageous for us at this point to try and get along with China, right? And but is that just, can that just not happen?
No, it could happen if they opened up their communication channels and their information channels, but they won't do that because if they did that, then their constituency would see the abundance of the free markets and they would want to have a free market themselves. Basically, I mean, when it comes to like an actual, I'm not talking about like a Scandinavian country. I'm talking about an actual communist country. It
Right.
relies on the manipulation and oppression of the working class. If the media was open where they can see what's going on in other places and they can read about what's going on in other places, there would be a revolution there against the communist regime, and the CCP or the communist regime would lose power themselves. It's the individual holding power over the people, whereas like it's advertised here as like, well, the people have the power, the community has the power, but realistically, it's whoever gets to enforce that has the power. If it's advertised about all the abundance that happens in the free markets, well, then the entire system would come down, and they would choose to. Well, we'd rather have a capitalist system, and so the people in power aren't going to allow that to happen, which is partially why it's like a, what do you call it? It's a catch-22 where there's no way for just a communist bloc and a capitalist bloc to exist in peace without both feeling as if they're threatened by the other.
Yeah, I was gonna say, 'cause a lot of the things you just said about China, I feel like also do apply to the U.S. as well, though, where it's like,
No,
oh,
they do. I agree.
like they say that power comes from the people in a communist country. Well, we say that in the U.S. as well. Well, okay, it's only as good as the people who enforce it. Well, okay, isn't that also true here as well?
Yeah, yeah, that is,
Right.
and that's why a lot of the debates end up in stalemates
I
because
think
it
it's
is
a to both ways, as if that's not like redundant to
well,
say, anyways.
well, like when we've had debates about like socialism versus capitalism, like my your point has always been like, well, we're being oppressed by like the corporate oligarchs, which I can't disagree with, but I'll say at least the corporate my counter would be at least the corporate oligarchs got to become the corporate oligarchs by building something up in like somewhat earning it rather than just being like the government who took it by force. And so, but both sides work, which is like either way, there are still the elite oligarchs, and so
I feel like a lot of those corporations took it by force for the most part as well.
and that's the thing I didn't realize for a while is that
Right.
when it comes to the domestic front, they didn't, but when it comes to the foreign front, a lot of
Right.
them did. We
It's
saw
neither
like that
here nor
happen in
here.
South America a lot. That happened in the Middle East a lot where there's a war and they do it sneakily, so it's not like the U.S. military came in and killed a bunch of people and then took their shit. It's more so like the CIA funds a rebel group, like we saw in Afghanistan, funds a rebel group. They overthrow the government, and then the CIA moves in and they kind of secure it, make sure it's good, and then we bring in ExxonMobil or whoever, and they now own the oil. We've that's happened quite a bit too. So it is same thing happens when it comes to like international deals. I'd say.
Right. It's like that horseshoe fucking thing again. When we talked about the other day, it's like, oh, well, in a communist system, all of private industry is, made public. Well, all right, in a fascist system, it's well, all of the public infrastructure is taken over by private corporations. And it's like, well, fucking really, it kind of sounds like the a slightly different way of saying the same damn thing. It's some in groups that essentially takes control of everything.
But it just relies like so like my defense on capitalism, like as we know, I love capitalism, but that relies on the fact that the capitalists and the government are separate. The entity that has the monopoly over violence should partake in as little else as possible. Their whole job should be we're going to make sure that nobody intervenes in this, free trade agreement. That entity can, if that's going to act on behalf of the corporations and use violence to enforce their incentives, well, then that's no longer the free market. That's now what you might describe as fascism or some type of like cronyism or something like
Authoritarian.
that, which I'm just as much against as the communism. And yeah, so that's where the horseshoe is. And I think all reasonable people would fall somewhere where it's like, I think it when it comes to division of power, it's like government versus private. I don't think the solution to that though is we say, all right, enough with corporations. We're going to give that very same government that use the violence on behalf of the corporations. We're just going to give them the power directly. I don't think that's the solution either. I think both
Right.
of those are ridiculous.
It's the more in the last like few months, I've been I think we talked about this the other day. I've been, reading more like libertarian things, and the idea of having a government that's very limited is sounding more and more appealing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm a pretty strong libertarian. I mean, I'd say I don't necessarily identify with anything specifically. Like I'm in that club. But I mean, the libertarians I think have it right, more so than anyone else I've seen.
Yeah, probably. And then there's like the ridiculous people who are like, oh, there shouldn't be like driver's licenses or anything like that. It's like, well, I would like to see some competency in your ability to wield a 2,000-ton piece of metal going 100 miles an hour, right? Obviously,
Yeah,
there's flaws and everything like that.
yeah, but honestly, I mean, like if you look at like mainstream libertarians, I don't think they're saying that. Maybe they are. I don't know. But for the ones I've seen, like Dave Smith and like Rand Paul and these guys, I think that a lot of that stuff is like intentionally put like kind of boosted by the algorithms to kind of undermine the whole libertarian idea where it's like like so they're saying like, oh, the government shouldn't be involved, so if the government wants to suppress that idea. It's like, what do? It's like,
Right.
well, what, you want anyone to drive without a license? The government gives licenses. I feel like that's kind of boosted because it's the kooks of the club making idiots of themselves, and then that's used to undermine the rest of the idea.
Yeah, like, and what I've been forming more and more in my head on what like an ideal government would be, I'm thinking as small as possible, but provides very necessary things. You know, like again, like military, you're always going to need, right? Like a judicial system, you're always going to need. But then even things like if you try to maximize a government for freedom and prosperity, right? I think that's pretty good thing to try and maximize your government of what their ideal should be is providing the most amount of freedom and prosperity to our constituency as we possibly can, right? What more freedom, like freeing and prosperous, could you do than providing every single person with housing and food? If you start off providing people with housing and food, then you liberate them from many other shackles in life. And then all the government would really have to do is provide a couple other key facets like police and military, infrastructure, roads, public transit, and I don't know, I have like one or two other things written down. And then aside from that, you might not need the government for very many things. You can let the free market do basically everything else. If you can eat and you have a place to sleep, then like how are you not free essentially?
Is your suggestion then that the government provides housing and food? So everybody gets a house, government pays for it. Everybody gets food, government pays for it. If so, who does the government get it from?
Us. It's always from us.
So then wouldn't that be government interference in what otherwise would be a free market? Therefore, it's actually more expensive.
Yeah, possibly. But if that baseline is prosperity, like it would be slightly more expensive probably to go through the government to make sure everyone has a house than what we currently have, wherein most people have houses, but not everyone does.
But if so, like, could everyone have one if they? Or hang on, let me
I think
rephrase that.
everyone
So,
would get like we would build like high rise like domiciles, essentially like 1 bedroom apartments, basically, right? So like you have your government allotted 1 bedroom house if you want it, or if you know you go out and you apply yourself and in the free market you make money and you want to buy like a nicer house, you can buy a nicer house still. But there's always that fallback like 1 bedroom in a high rise the government apartment complex buildings is kind of what I was thinking.
I mean, I can see it, but I just don't see that the government's able to do it. So, like, if it was that easy for the government to do that, I guess if the government were to do that, wouldn't that mean that it would have been more cost effective for the free market to have already done it? Like, if there was a bunch of people who couldn't afford the nice fancy high rise, but they were hardworking people, wouldn't it be more beneficial for me as a private citizen who has a bunch of money to invest in a much more affordable high rise and offer a deal, whereas like I will make some money myself, but it will be much more affordable than what current housing prices are?
Affordable housing complexes are constantly rejected from being built by the government for the reason that they would drive down other housing prices.
Yeah, but they're also, yes, in certain areas, but they're also constantly being built by the government as well, or being at least funded by the government as well through Section 8 housing.
Yes.
But then what ends up happening there is that like these are Section 8 housing, so it's like you're already putting a bunch of people who are struggling to get by all in the same community. Of course, no one's going to build a restaurant there, or because they know that these people don't have the spare cash to spend at the restaurant, so it's a bad investment. So there is a problem there. I agree, but I
But
just
then
don't know. I
also
don't know that the government providing housing is like. I wouldn't say that's very libertarian, though.
but no, it's not. It's not. It's like
That's your
I want to.
exception to the
Right,
libertarian.
right. That
Yeah,
one
yeah.
and the food ones are not libertarian ideas. Wherein I've wanted to call it like my own personal, like, I don't know, like socialist libertarianism or something like that, right? Where you build in like a couple safety nets, and then you have mostly libertarian ideas.
I mean,
But
the food is not bad where it's like, I mean, it's kind of the same argument of like, okay, if I were to go work at, say, McDonald's as a cashier and I were to make $10 an hour, and I would work 40 hours a week, I'd make $400 a week. Well, the rent is gonna run me dry basically if I were to pay for my own place, and I'd probably spend that much on food. So I could just use the government supplied one and then not work, and I'd actually make more money. But then what happens? Then it's a chain reaction of like, well, now McDonald's has to pay their people $15 an hour, and it's like, then you don't have, it's kind of like, but maybe, but with AI taking a lot of the low skill level jobs, they're, I'm not opposed to the safety net.
and
I
and
guess,
a lot of what I'm thinking is kind of all right, like 10, 20 years from now, if we can have AI automated like farms, basically, right? And the cost of like running a farm is pretty fucking low. Essentially, you got to pay for like water and like upkeep of like the machinery, basically. Like, could we not then provide and essentially almost like a lot more like soup kitchens almost is what I'm saying. Like it's not like you can go in and get like every like fucking like ribeye steaks for free from the government. No, I'm talking about like if you are so poor, you can just go and get like a meal from this place basically. Like they like serve
yeah.
like a standard meal of like I don't know protein veggie rice or something like that.
So, all right, yeah, I like that point because that was kind of what I was trying to get to about the education, which is that in what we've seen in the last 20 years is that information has become practically free. Where it
Right.
used to be you'd have to go buy a physical book and that costed the paper and the binder and the print and the ink and the printing and the actual labor to put it together. If you want to learn something, you had to go buy that book. Now that's no longer cost. The information is so close to free where it's like, yes, that could be done with very little, if any, human labor. I mean, one human can type it up once and then it's available for everyone else to see without any more human labor. That's
And
huge.
most of it's already been typed. Like it's
Right.
already almost all
It's
out
already
there.
there. You don't even got to type it. AI can type it. Yeah, it's
Right.
already out there. And so yes, what you're saying with the food is basically if it becomes to a point where food, which it probably will very soon, where food requires very little human labor, if any,
Right.
to produce, then we're at the point where it's practically free, effectively free, or at least very low cost for the government to cover to, allow for people who are struggling to get by, who need that little boost, who need that. I'm with you on that. I would say
Right.
here's the caveat to it is that it cannot be. I think this the right and left might find some common ground here. Currently, the problem with welfare and kind of all these like social services that the right has is that it's offering better stuff to people who don't work. It's a misaligned incentive structure. It's saying if you don't have
Exactly.
a job, you can have this, but if you do have a job, you can't have it. I think in this situation you're describing, it's anyone can have it. You can be Jeff Bezos himself if you want to walk in and get some spaghettios from. Then you can have them if you want, and we're
Right.
not restricting anybody. That I think is huge. That's UBI basically, and that I think
But it's food. But
is a big
it's
thing.
something that's completely necessary to sustain any group. And it's
Yeah,
not here's SNAP benefits, and I don't know if you can buy liquor or whatever with it, but like you can like there's some workarounds where you don't necessarily have to be spending it on food and supplies for your children, right?
hmm
This is literally like, are you hungry? All right, go fucking grab a meal.
like when it comes to SNAP benefits, all the left is going to say, well, the right just hates SNAP benefits because they want people to starve. And then you see people saying, oh, well, the reason it's like someone on the right will post something and be like, look, if they're getting steak on SNAP benefits. And then someone will say, oh, look, these people think they're too good and that these other people are so poor. And
And
it's
like
like,
you,
no, no,
I don't eat steak. Like you're some guy working some construction job. Like I don't eat steaks. Why is that guy eating steaks?
it creates a distorted incentive structure where now it's like, how come the guy who's working 80-hour weeks, he can't afford the steak, but the person who's not working at all can? Well, then the other guy's going to be incentivized to not work. If you create something where it's like, here's the baseline, and it's, I think the big difference on the big thought on the right, and I can speak for myself, I can't speak for everyone, but at least my thing is that you cannot give government handouts to a select few because then you've created a protected class. And that goes for the bottom and also goes for the top. Same reason I'm pissed about the Epstein thing is laws for the normal people. We can't do that, but then they're going to get no punishment. They should get punished just like the rest of us would. Same goes for the, look, if you're not providing anything, you're not making an income, well, then you should struggle to get by just like the rest of us who are making an income. But I do like the idea of UBI. I've never been opposed to UBI. We've talked UBI before. Basically, we get to a point where things are so cheap. It's the state. It's kind of a Marxist thing, really. The state of abundance, where like
Right.
things are so cheap, where it's like we no longer need human labor to produce them. So I'm not super opposed to that if we get there.
Right. And it's like the same idea. It's like, all right, well, Jeff Bezos could go live in that 1 bedroom apartment. He never fucking would. Right. So it's not like, it's not the, because it isn't like communist ideal. It's like, well, everyone lives in a 1 bedroom apartment, right? It's like everyone is totally equal. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like, if you do really need it, then you can have it. And it's the same for, at that point, if you have food and you have a place to live, we are beyond labor at that point. You don't have to work if you don't want to. Or if you want to be able to afford a nicer house and you want to be able to afford a nicer car and you want to be able to afford the steaks, then you can go out and get a fucking job, right?
Yeah, and that's I mean that is a good one because now as we're talking about, it, I'm realizing that a lot of the counter argument to that is literally just the it's like the rewarding of people who aren't contributing. That's the right wing perspective. When it comes even to like universal health care, now here's where okay, now here's a little bit of debate on that. So like say we were to apply that to healthcare or even food or housing, would this I think is an actual problem. How do we know that how do we at least like ensure that the government is incentivized to actually provide it? Because when we look at like universal healthcare, for example, it's like, okay, if we were to do that, so right now our healthcare costs a shit ton, but it's coming from the private citizens. If it's coming from the government and it's basically a check to the healthcare companies, or let's use to the food companies, well, like, what's to say that then the food companies don't just jack up their prices because they know they have a constant customer? Because you're no longer operating a free market. Now it's like, whatever the food costs. It would have to be like a constant, and the government does do this, and it's actually pretty good. It'd be like a constant bidding thing. It'd be like, the government would have to issue out like, here's the quality threshold, and whatever company can provide us this for the lowest price. It would have to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they're obviously we're talking through this, so don't have all the answers for shit like that. But you would have to involve some sort of mechanism wherein there is still competition, right? And that's kind of
Yes.
what I'm going for a little bit there. It's like it's not total government control over, like the food sector. It's just like, all right, the government will purchase whatever necessary amount of food that they need to provide those meals, right?
Yeah, no, I don't hate the idea so long as it's like pretty transparent as far as like what the government is spending the money on. Because I think that's one of the big things is that we get
Well, that's one of our huge issues now is every fucking year our federal government fails like a $2 trillion audit. And it's like, where the fuck did that money go? That
exactly.
cannot be fucking legal. And that's where like these libertarian things I've been listening to and reading about the last like few months, where that's stemming from is like, fuck, the amount of like bloat in the government, it just has to be insane at this point.
Exactly. And I feel like it's one of those problems where it's like we've gone so off course that we're now, it's kind of like the problem of like, if you've got a ship that's going, straight north and they start off and they're just 1 or 2 degrees a little bit to the west. Well, then, by the time we correct it, we're on the other side of the world. If we wait and we keep going where we think is north, but it's actually, we started off just a degree or two this way. Now
Yeah.
we're so far away. I think that's what we have because it's like you know, when it comes to like the money system, it's like, okay, so we're just going to keep printing money to cover our deficits, that type of thing. We are now so far into that zone of corruption where it's hard to like regain the trust in government to come back and be like, oh, now we're just going to be like super honest and transparent.
Because it feels very hard at this point to enact any sort of change in the system. It feels like the system is like bigger than us. Basically, it's so complex and large and interwoven that changing any aspect of it seems really fucking difficult. Like, how hard would it be to get like Citizens United, say, repealed? That would be almost damn near impossible at this point, I feel like. And that was something that only came about like 20 years ago or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, and yeah, to feed on that too, like one thing too that I think is a common like point of contention between like the left and the right is that like yes, what you just said is true, and I feel like the way it's often worded by the left offends the right because what the right believes, which I think is also true, like they're not mutually exclusive. The right believes like the system was designed so good, and the fact that it was like corrupted in that way, like blood, like no one's for that. Everyone agrees that that's bad, but the system was designed so good, which was that that would easily be changed if we had an educated populace. Like the system was designed for an educated populace, and so like it's kind of like it's the constant cycle of like you guys are wrong, you guys are idiots, you guys are wrong, and it's like back and forth. And the reason why is because like something like that comes up, and it's like yes, everyone agrees with that. Why isn't it? The system does have a mechanism to do that, but it requires an educated populace who knows what Citizens United is and is like, no, that's bad, and votes against it. The problem is that when we have a democracy, 90% of the people have no idea what the fuck that is, but they're still voting. And so the people are just going to vote for whatever jackass, whether it's Trump or Biden or Kamala or whoever, whatever jackass comes out there and says some cool shit that gets a lot of views on TikTok. And it's like, nobody even knows what the actual problems are. And
Right.
so but when it comes like a lot of the left, like they'll like diss
The
America.
the
They'll frame it in a way.
purposefully don't let you see what the true issues are, like the amount of fucking money that are now in our elections, the amount of special interest groups that can now seize control of elections and policy, essentially. And then you're stuck. Most of the people are stuck debating the hot topics.
But they do let you see it, though. That's what I'm saying. They do let you see it, but we just choose not to because it's not that fun. It's not that exciting to pour through documents. It's boring. We'd rather see like a clip of Trump like calling someone piggy or something. And it's like, but that's the thing is that like all like when the left says this, and I'm not speaking for myself, like I can see where the divide is here. The right takes it as like that's an insult to the Constitution. You're anti-America, and but the left is bringing up real issues, and the right saying like, well, that's just not true because like the Constitution does allow that, and like nobody's willing to say like, no, like the Constitution is very good. It was a very innovative thing, and it still is, and it just depends on something that is no longer existent, which is like an American attention span and an ambition that gives a fuck about what's going on. Let's face it, most of the problem is no one gives a fuck. If I ask a random person on the street who they voted for, they would give an answer and I'd say why, and it'd be like because I saw like a 10-second video of them saying something like ridiculous that I thought was like funny or cool or good or whatever, and it's like the system has become too easy to manipulate, I guess.
Most people probably couldn't give you a reason why they voted for someone. The only thing that they could say is, I didn't want the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's based off of probably no policy. It's almost based entirely off fear-mongering on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, social media is the downfall of the system was designed beautifully at a time when there was no social media and like we were in a different world. It was a different world.
Well, that's one of the things is like, and I don't know what government laws could even really prevent this, if like anything could really prevent it realistically. But the fact that we just allowed like social media and like these generative programs to just run rampant with no checks, like how we just totally dove in and not even like thought of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, and because if we did, try to restrict it, then it would be a violation of the Constitution that was
Right.
written in a time when there was no social media. And so it that's like the sad reality of it is that like one of my favorite authors, Yuval Noah Harari, one of his big points is that like the big threat of current times, it is the technology just in general, the fact that it exists because it fundamentally benefits the authoritarian government over the free market democracy government or over the humanitarian government. It benefits the authoritarian government because if we respect everyone's freedom of speech and we respect everyone's like freedom of communication, and the government is just going to let companies do what they want to do and people talk to who they want to talk to and post what they want to post, well then we're fucked because the countries that have the authoritarian that's like no, if you do that we'll throw you in jail or kill you. Those countries have a huge advantage now, which that sucks, and I don't know the solution, but it's like
Right.
that's what
Right.
we're fighting against. That's part of the reason I'm pro America, because like part of me wants there to continue to be this freedom of speech, which I think is a great thing, freedom of speech, democracy, all this stuff. But we are working in a technological world that does not that there's a disadvantage that comes with that, not an advantage. It used to be there was an advantage, now there's a disadvantage, and that's the demise of Western civilization and democracy. It's a technological one, and we're the ones that invented the shit.
It's the disadvantage of allowing of dissenting opinions.
Yeah, it gives you a disadvantage as a collective when societies are built off of like collective cohesion. Then the countries that allow people to speak freely are at a disadvantage compared to the companies that, compared to the countries that um, control speech. Which,
Right. And because it's not even the fact that all right, you can disagree with someone. People have disagreed with people all throughout history, right? It's just the fact that, like, all right, to disagree with someone, you had to go into the town square, you had to have a meeting, everyone had to get up and like debate the merits or like the drawbacks to like some new rule that the town's trying to pass, right? Like, oh, I don't know, it's like a 2% tax on alcohol or something like that, right? Everyone get up and talk about it. But you could only talk about it when you're together, seeing them face to face. Now you're just getting blasted with information 24/7. You can't escape the information. I like this quote. Technology used to be an escape from the real world. Now the real world is an escape from technology. Actually, with social media. Social media used to be an escape from the real world. Now the real world is an escape from social media. It's a fucking cesspool. We were talking about this the other day about I was talking about Reddit, how I have to like stop myself from going down like these deep like Reddit dives just because I get like so upset because everyone on Reddit's like so fucking angry and upset all the time. And you were saying the same thing. It's you hardly see anything positive and it's all negative.
yeah, yeah, and I think I mean, if we know that, then that means the authoritarian dictators know that, and that also means that our government knows that. And I think that that's the real battle being fought, where it's not about like that's the part about it where it's like we feel so safe and secure because we have the best military, but it's like the battle's not being fought in the same. We had the best military when the battle was being fought physically, and it's not anymore. It is the hearts and minds battle, and we have a huge disadvantage when it comes to that. And so to me, that means there's only two possible outcomes, and both of them are terrible. I mean, both of them are the same. Actually, it's the horseshoe. It comes back the same. It's one. It's we lose, and then we become subject to an authoritarian regime, or we become an authoritarian regime ourselves in order to try to win. And so, either way, to somebody like me and you, it doesn't matter. We're just subjects of an authoritarian regime, whether it's the United States or China or Russia or whoever. It doesn't matter. The whole fight that we're fighting is against the like my all of my political leanings and like geopolitical leanings all come down to like the free market democracy, free speech, all this stuff is way better than the authoritarian regime. And it turns out it's like there's no way that the authoritarian regime is going to win regardless. It seems like maybe I'm missing. Maybe there'll be a miraculous
Well,
recovery. Maybe blockchain saves us. That's my only hope.
yeah, I mean that was my obvious question, which is going to be is like, what can we do about it? And I don't doesn't seem like we can do much. It has to be some form of I say this fucking every time we bring this up, it feels like too, some form of like grassroots public mobilization to, I don't know, like correct course.
I don't know. It always I always come to this thought, and I don't know if it's because it's the logical conclusion or it's just because it's like hopeful wishing. But I do always I feel like I've done this a couple times where I've come to blockchain as like, where it's like as I'm saying it, I'm like blockchain does kind of solve that a little bit. So maybe I mean that would be the happiest ending of all if like we get to this point where it looks like the authoritarians are winning, and then you know blockchain crypto ends up being the tool that stops it from happening. That'd be a great ending to this whole saga.
Yeah. I don't know. We got a couple small ones if you want to do those, or if you had anything
Yeah.
else.
No, yeah, let's might as well. We got the World War III special here.
Yep. All right. Anthropic versus ChatGPT debacle that went down about a week ago. Me and you texted over this, but be good to throw on the podcast. So for anyone who isn't chronically online, like me and Richie are, not chronically into the tech and AI sector, there's a big debacle that went down about a week ago, wherein um, Anthropic was Anthropic's been used by our military. It was used on the strike in Maduro when we took him out in was like 30 minutes, some absolutely crazy like that. But they were, I think, trying to strike up like a new deal or like renew their deal maybe with the military. And two things that they had in the contract was they wanted no mass surveillance of American citizens, and they wanted no fully AI automatic weapon systems that didn't have a human participating in those. And the US government basically said like, no, we need those. And Anthropic said like, well, we're not capitulating with that. US government military, I think like Pete Hegseth posted some crazy shit. They were they like came out so hard against Anthropic, called it, they labeled it something like insane, like a threat to US like systems or something like that, because they wouldn't capitulate to these terms. And they held steady. Lo and behold, 2 hours later, ChatGPT, OpenAI, signs an agreement with the military to use their systems now. However, they have in there the clause no mass surveillance of US citizens and no fully AI automatic weapons. So this was a whole fucking huge thing because people were like, all right, well, Anthropic was standing up for the people, but then OpenAI came in, signed the same deal. What the hell is going on there?
So I think it was a bit of the media war we're talking about, because Anthropic was then, either a day or two later, found to be the system that they were using for the attacks on Iran. So
Yeah, and they kept using it. Right.
so I think it was a smoke and mirrors. I think it was fuck Anthropic. We're not using them. We're not using them. That way, the rival intelligence organizations take their attention off. That was at least the attempt. Take their attention off of Anthropic. Meanwhile, the whole time they're planning on using Anthropic. I think that's Trump's. That's his fucking game, dude. That's what he does with everything. Same thing with the stock. Same thing with everything. But I did see also on that ChatGPT lost like a shit ton of users immediately following that, which
Yeah,
I don't blame. I might reconsider my use of ChatGPT too if that was the deal that was signed, because like we're talking about, that's not what we want.
well, no.
That's
Here's
the
the thing is, OpenAI got those things that Anthropic wanted, but that the military told Anthropic, we need these. So they said they needed the mass surveillance, they needed fully automatic weapons. Anthropic said no. ChatGPT also says no, and they're like, all right.
okay. I had
So
it backwards. I thought ChatGPT said yes.
no, that's the whole issue. Is people are like, so what the fuck actually happened here? And apparently, then the speculations were Anthropic shot up to #1 app on the App Store after this whole ordeal. Shit ton of new users. People are saying this was actually all just a fucking ploy by Anthropic to make it seem like, we are the ethical, moral AI. Like
Yeah,
we're the ones standing up to the big bad government. Come over to our side.
that makes a lot of sense, actually. That's the art of the deal right there. Because at the same time, it was like, what did the government need? The government needed a little bit of a diversion. They needed someone to kind of take the hit. When like also one thing about both those companies, neither of them are publicly traded, and so if they can operate in that fashion without risking like a stock market collapse or something. Oh yeah, we go out and say like, yeah, we're not using Anthropic. Like if Trump were to come out and say that about like Facebook, well, we'd be at, or like Tesla, we'd be facing a real problem because his words alone carry so much weight that we would have seen the entire stock market collapse a couple percent in a day, which is obviously no good. But the fact that Anthropic and ChatGPT are both privately held companies, they're able to pull this manipulative move where like they're throwing optics out there. It's I do believe that that was just likely a diversion, like an intentional diversion. I honestly I think that's probably I think he's done it many times. I think that's like one of the more obvious ones. Like in hindsight. I
Yeah,
wouldn't have
you
thought at the time, but
when I texted you that, you're like, that just kind of seems like some kind of like insider manipulation, sort of.
well, just not even
Uh,
insider, but just like outsider manipulation more so, where he goes to the world and says, yeah, Anthropic's terrible. We're not using it. They won't help us out. They won't do this. And then he goes and uses it to attack another country. It's like, that's likely a diversion to Iran's intelligence agency or like at least an attempt. Whether it works or not, I don't know. But I feel like that's like it's like an allusion to the rest of the globe. I mean, I my first year I was telling Meg this I think, but like my first I started investing during Biden's administration. Trump's back, and I'm like within 1 year I'm like, dude, I can't stand this fucking guy because I can't every single like I can never get a read off of him, and it's all random. And then I kind of realized like that is what his whole point is. His whole point is to make it so that like these other foreign countries can't get a read off me. They don't know what I'm going to do. He's the it's like the meme of like can't tell my next move. He's pulling that constantly. I feel like that one is just it's got to be just one of those.
yeah. Had another one. Have you seen anything about tariff refunds?
Hmm. Well,
So,
the Supreme Court shut it down. Was that it?
so the Supreme Court struck down Trump's tariffs, right? So then, because of that, tariff refunds might be coming because, well, okay, if that was an illegal tariff, then restitution will have to be made to parties. Now, here's the whole fucking thing with that is initially, when I had seen this, people were saying that American companies were going to be getting these tariff refunds. What the fuck does that mean? Tariff refunds for companies would mean importers got charged, say, 25%, a higher rate. They had to pay that, all right? But then they passed that on to us, so they weren't fucking losing any money. If anything, they might have like gained money. Probably not gained money, but they at least passed the cost of the tariffs on to us. We pay for those tariffs, and then come to find out these tariffs were illegal, so they're getting refunds. They go back to the companies. Then that is literally our fucking tax dollars getting sent right back to the fucking companies who increased prices on us. Now,
Yes,
however,
that's good. That's good. I like that.
however, I've seen things getting floated around of Americans receiving like tariff refund checks, almost like like COVID stimulus checks, something in that vein. Obviously, I'm much more in favor of people getting reimbursed for the costs of these tariffs than the companies getting reimbursed the cost of the tariffs that they already passed on to us. Did
Yeah,
you
I
see?
mean,
Did you see any part of that?
I didn't see that part, and
Yeah.
I'm all right with either, honestly. Like, if the companies get it, I think that's good, and if the, to be honest, I prefer no one gets it. But if someone's gonna get it, and the companies get it, I'm good with that. If the people get it, I'm good with that too.
Well, even if they give it to
I
us,
don't take
we would
issue with
just
any
give
of
it
that.
right back to the companies. So, like,
True,
at
that's
least
kind of what I mean. Is it all
at
goes back to
least
the
like
same
give it to
spot?
us so that we can then like get something out of it.
And who would the go? And who would the who? If it goes to us, it goes right back to the companies, and if it goes right back to the companies, it goes right back to the government. So it ends up in the same spot.
Yeah, I guess. However, here's the ultimate kicker in this one. Our boy, the man, the myth, the legend, Howard Lutnick, supposedly bought the rights, bought contracts for tariff refunds for 25 cents on the dollar. So the guy,
Wait, yeah, what does that mean?
yeah, the guy who fucking I think was part of implementing the tariffs bought contract rights to buy tariff refunds for 25 cents on the dollar.
Why would anyone do that? Why would anyone sell him those? Wait, he's saying he'll pay 20. Wait, he'll pay it. Wait,
He pays for a contract that if tariff money gets refunded, he 4x's his money because he bought the contract rights at 25 cents on the.
but how does he get it? Like, what company would agree to that?
Anyone who I think didn't think that the tariffs would be refunded.
So it's like a bet, basically.
Yeah.
Huh, okay.
So
So they're yeah, they're gambling basically. So he's
yes.
buying it. He's betting at plus 300 odds that the tariffs don't or that the tariffs refunds do go through.
Yes. And he was like instrumental, I believe, in the tariffs in the first place. So people are crying foul on that.
Wasn't he also snorkeling on the island?
He was an island boy. That was the dude who said
He was just
like
there for but he was just there for the deep sea fishing.
I was just there for the snorkeling. I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, that guy's a clown. He's got to go. Might bet on him to be out next.
Here's one more I got. Might be my last one here. A student recently got in trouble for so all kids have like Chromebooks now that the classes give out. You can like bring them home, use them as your laptop or whatever. Apparently this student got a bad grade on like an English paper or something. So his mom tells him like, "Yo, email the teacher to see like what you can do to like, change the grade, if you can like do like another essay or whatever, right?" So when the kid's like writing out his email to his teacher, he like writes some unsavory jokes, like some unsavory things, right? Like I think something he wrote was like change my grade or I'm gonna shoot up the school or whatever, right? And then he like shows his mom. He's like, isn't this
That'll
funny?
that'll yeah,
And
that'll get you.
she's like, no. But he like deletes that. He like, it's like one of those things. It's like almost just like your thought process. You're just fucking like typing it out or whatever. He doesn't like send that to the teacher, right? He just types that into like an email, deletes it because he never like was gonna send it. It was just like one of those fucking things that you write down like you're frustrated that you've like a bad grade or whatever.
Intrusive thoughts. Yeah.
It's intrusive thoughts, right? But he just like wrote them out instead of like keeping them up there. Didn't send the email with that in there, but the school has like keystrokes being monitored.
Oh.
So he gets called down to the principal's office. He's in mega trouble for threats against the school or whatever. So now it's a huge, it's going to court. It's a like First Amendment free speech thing going on there. And that is ever approaching the crime of thought crime, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. That's total bullshit if you didn't send it. I mean, I'm surprised they were able even to get that. I mean, I guess that's where we're at when it comes to the surveillance state, where they can see what you type up even if you didn't send it. But I mean, the crime is sending it, not, yeah, you're right. It's thought crime. It's not. That's actually kind of scary. I gotta go look at some texts I've typed up and didn't send.
How many times have you done that? Just like, I don't know, like you, right? You thought something to someone who pissed you off. You start like typing something out. It's like, I'm not gonna actually say that, but it's almost like therapy in a little bit. Obviously, I'm not talking about fucking like talking about school shootings is therapy, but like, just the act
No,
of
yeah,
writing
I mean,
something down is, like I think that's like taught in like therapy class. So it's like, all right, like write, like take a journal, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, even the keystrokes technology, like I've known that was a thing, but I was always under the impression that that was more so like a thing of like, you know, I didn't think it was like something that you would it would be to that degree where it's like I'm just some random student, I type something and then they see that I type that. It's like you would think there would be so many keystrokes that it's only ever actually coming up if there was like an investigation into a crime, and then they went into your phone to see that you know try to,
They probably
then
just
they can
have a
maybe pull it up.
flag for like shooting or like anything like that.
Yeah, but no, I mean that I would be in favor of a law where it's like keystrokes can be accessed like in an encrypted version, but they can't actually be accessed in the actual version unless there's like an investigation into it. Like if he did shoot, if there was a school shooting the next day, and then they went through and they flagged keystrokes, and then it pulled up, then it's like okay, there you go. Now that seems more fair. But the
Well,
fact that
here I was
it's
gonna say here's a weird corollary. Is I think I've seen I did see this school shooting like I think it was like 2020, something along the lines of the kid had like written down in a notebook like something about like the voices keep telling me to like whatever shoot up the school or whatever, right? And then so if you're a teacher and you find that book, most people would then say you are obligated to bring that to the attention of people. Like, I found this guy is having these thoughts, right? So that's, and I think I would agree with that, right? I would very much want a teacher to bring that to the attention of, like the principal or the parents or whoever, so that we can like maybe fucking get some help for this kid. And that's a weird thing, digital versus analog, how there's like some kind of divide there.
yeah, that is true. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That is a good one. It's just it's the yeah, yeah, because it's yeah,
I
it's
don't
the
know.
same
It's
thing. No,
basically
that's
the same damn thing.
I would say this. It's like if on your if they like whatever took the guy's phone or something, and they saw in his notes on his phone he said that, or
Right.
if he texted to somebody else, or even just like wrote it in there somehow, that's one thing. But the fact that it was like typed and then delete, that would be like
Right.
finding the notebook, but it's crossed out. Still kind of, I don't know, man. That's
Yeah.
a tough one. It's a new world. It's a new world.
If things crossed out in the notebook, like it's still there, right? It's weird. It's a weird one.
That's no, I mean, I think the scary part about the keystrokes thing though is that like, okay, that's an extreme example, but then you've also got other examples where it's like I mean, I can think of a few. I'm sure everyone can think of some where you like started typing something, even if it wasn't like ill intended, but like you started typing it and then you're like, oh no, I shouldn't say that. That sounds dumb. And then you backstroke. It's like you're telling me they can still see that even though I didn't send it. That's like
Uh-huh.
it. It's like the secrecy of it, where like most people don't realize that. I didn't realize that until you just said it. That like whatever I type, even if I don't send it, it can still be seen by the company or by whoever. Uh, that's kind of like the scary part of like, everyone's got something that they typed in that they didn't mean, that they didn't send, and it's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like where does that go? And the thing about the diary, the thing about the notebook, is that if the teacher doesn't find it, the teacher doesn't have any reason to be looking at it. Well, then that's just a note to myself that no one will ever see. Whereas, like, that guy probably thought this is just a note to myself where no one will ever see. And then turns out no one came and stole his computer or stole his backpack or anything. It's just that, like, as he typed it, they saw it. That's
Yeah.
It's the all seeing eye. That's the scary part, I think.
Yeah. It's about all I got. You got anything else?
Yeah, no, that's all I got, too. It's a good one.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Yep.